Hi, this is Joe Green, head pastor of St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, also the founder of the 2019 movement. And I want to share a couple of thoughts with you. This is a follow-up to one of the videos I did a little while ago. If you get a chance to go to, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, look at my previous, go to my previous videos, and I did one on WAP. And most of you may be familiar with the song WAP. It's very popular. I believe it was #1 at one point. I don't know if it still is or not. I don't really listen to that type of music. But it was #1 in the country, and it's a song with Cardi B, who's a very popular rapper, probably is up and coming and very popular as well. So they made this song, WAP, is very derogatory, and I don't want to use the name, but it's a reference to part of the female anatomy. So I'll just put it that way. And it's very salacious, very lascivious, very lust-provoking song. The video is even worse because it's very, I won't say it's worse, it's probably the same, but I think it's important to have these type of conversations because recently what happened was Cardi B was doing a live. I don't know if it was on Instagram or wherever she was doing it. And on her Instagram, while she was doing her live feed, she was playing WAP in the background, her top song, her #1 song, and her daughter walked into the room, and her daughter's very young, and she hurried up and shut off the song because she didn't want her daughter to listen to the song. Now, what does that say? Now, some people criticize her, which she should have been criticized, I think, to a certain degree, and to another degree, she shouldn't. So she shouldn't be criticized for the simple fact that her daughter shouldn't be listening to that type of song. It's an adult song, and it's very has a lot of pornographic imagery in it, in the words and in the video. So her daughter is very young, a couple years old. She shouldn't be listening to that song. But by the same token, if she doesn't want her daughter listening to that song, what about other people's daughter? So you got to realize that a lot of children, a lot of young people look up to these women. And so she basically proved my previous point that these things are very detrimental to women in general. It's very degrading to women. And it's part of the intentional corruption of the culture, I believe. And I'll explain that we talked about. But I just thought it was very interesting that the song is not good enough for her daughter. I mean, it's too bad for her daughter to listen to, but yet she's okay with other people's daughters listening to the song as well. And my point is, I'm not saying what people do in their privacy of their bedroom or between husband and wife or whatever the case may be. But when you promote something and put it out in a public, you are promoting it. When you make a song or a video and you put it out there in the public, you're promoting the ideas behind the song. See, this wasn't a song where she was saying you shouldn't do this. This was a song where she was glamorizing women being objectified. And so she's promoting it. And I know what a lot of people will say, they'll come up with a lot of different things, but if I'm promoting something that's detrimental to someone else, then I'm guilty of whatever negative consequences that come from what I'm promoting, right? Which is why my job is to promote the gospel, to preach, to talk about the things of God. I try to promote positive things, educate people, equip people, and those type of things. So I'm not going to put any negativity in the atmosphere. Not to say that I'm perfect or I don't say or do anything negative, but I'm not going to intentionally promote it out to the public. So, and singers are role models, whether you want to or not. But that helps me move into my next point. So part of what we see here is a corrupting of the culture because these record labels, the entertainment industry as a whole, pays these people a lot of money to promote these horrible negative images. Cardi B is very well paid. She's promoted. She's on award shows. She's on billboards. She's on advertising to be admired. And so if you promote someone as someone to be admired, then you're also by default promoting what they promote. I'm going to say that again. If you're promoting someone as being someone to be admired or looked up to, then you're also promoting what they promote. And so if a company, for instance, a company may, they pay a lot of money to these celebrities. And there's a reason why they pay a lot of money to celebrities, because they understand how much influence celebrities have over the culture and over the popular culture. That's why they pay them so many dollars, because like Michael Jordan, when Michael Jordan was at the top, well, he's still very popular and an icon. But when Michael Jordan was the #1 basketball player in the world, Gatorade paid him millions of dollars to drink Gatorade and do a commercial because they knew the influence that he has over the culture. Or Nike and all these other, the reason these companies pay these people a lot of money to promote their product and to wear their product. And really, I don't think Michael Jordan ever said anything. He didn't have to go out and say, I want you guys all to drink Gatorade. Only thing they did was make a commercial and video him drinking Gatorade. And that was enough to influence people and culture. That's how that works. And so when you have entertainers that do the same thing, then you also have to realize the influence that they carry. And so when you understand cultural Marxism is part of the overall globalist agenda. And cultural Marxism, you had a gentleman by the name of Antonio Gramsci, right? Because what happens, you had these revolutions in Europe. You had the communist takeover of Russia. You had various other totalitarian governments that wanted to promote what is, this Marxist ideology throughout the world and make a one world governmental system. And they understood that they wanted to come up with a better strategy than violent overthrows, because like in Russia, even though they did a violent overthrow and a revolution, and some other countries, Italy and France and different places that had violent overthrows and revolutions, that's not the most that's not the way that they wanted to do it. That's not the preferred way in order to seize power. And so they came up with this idea of what is known as cultural Marxism. And so Antonio Gramsci, if you get a chance to look him up, Marcuse, and some of these other people that came up with these think tanks that came up with a way in order to seize power and to get the masses to give up power to them. And one of them was through cultural Marxism, which cultural Marxism is a way to basically corrupt the culture. Because if you promote the idea of hedonism, and hedonism, the definition of hedonism is when you pursue pleasure, like your life's goal is to pursue pleasure. And you see that more and more in the world. When you promote hedonism, this whole idea of do whatever you want to, which was Aleister Crowley and the Satanist motto, do whatever you will, is the whole of the law. There was a song back in the days, it's your thing, do what you want to do. I can't tell you. And I'm not going to say the rest of the lyrics, but some of you may be familiar with that song. But anyway, it was this whole idea of hedonism, promoting hedonism. But the people in these think tanks, these people that wanted to control society and culture, they promoted hedonism because they understood that hedonism leads to weakened individuals. I'm going to say that again. Hedonism leads to weakened individuals, which means if you live your life simply to pursue pleasure, and you don't stand on principles, but just pursuing pleasure, it creates a weakened individual, it creates a weakened community, and it creates weakened family structures that allow for people to be controlled. Because when you have weak people, then they become more dependent on the government. They become more dependent on the power structure because their resolve has been weakened. And so this whole promotion of hedonism in culture is one of the things that they plotted and schemed and conspired to do. And it's becoming very, very prevalent. Again, that's why these record labels are paying a lot of money to people like Cardi B or Megan Thee Stallion to promote this whole ideal of hedonism. Another thing I want to talk about too, along these same lines, this is all going to be tied in together, is there was recently I saw a video clip of Tracy McGrady, who is a NBA Hall of Famer. She was talking to a WNBA player who was the #1 draft. I can't recall her name, but nonetheless, they were having a conversation, and Tracy McGrady suggested to this woman who got drafted into the WNBA that they should lower the rim in the WNBA. And she said, why? He says, because if you lowered the rim, it would make the game more exciting, because now you have people come to see women dunking on each other. And the woman pushed back, right? She pushed back, and she pushed back in a way to say, oh, so basketball is just all about dunking on each other. And it was kind of this, she had this kind of, like very flippant attitude about how dare you say that, right? Now let me preface this with what I'm about to go to, when we talk about the next part of this. We're already talking about cultural Marxism. We're going to be talking about what's known as critical theory, which I've been talking in depth about. I'll do some more videos on critical theory. Critical theory is one of the strategies that is used by the globalists in order to help control, break down society in order to rebuild it up in a Marxist utopia, as they would want you to accept. So anyway, here's what part of the push that's happening. So this WNBA player and other female athletes, I heard the women's soccer team and some of these other women athletes that are complaining about how women athletes get paid so much less than men. I'm going to say that again. They're complaining because women athletes are getting paid substantially less than men. And they are trying to promote the idea that that's because of sexism. They're trying to promote the idea that that's because of sexism. And so they're saying that women should get paid equal to men. Now, the reason that that is Marxism 101, communism, socialism, whichever definition you want to give, is that the reason that women WNBA players get paid much less is because they generate much less revenue. I'm going to say that again. They generate much less revenue. It has nothing to do with sex, because the WNBA and anybody who's being honest will tell you it's not nearly as exciting as men's basketball. Now, let me give you some other facts that why I can back that up. If you look in women's tennis, Serena Williams is very high paid. I don't know if she's paid as much as the top male athlete, but she's paid a large amount of money because women's tennis is very exciting and more people will pay to see women's tennis. Women's tennis, some would argue, could be as exciting as men's tennis, even though women are not as big and strong and as fast as men, but yet the game is more exciting because it's a level playing field. You're playing against the opponent. Whereas in the NBA, you have a rim that's 10 foot tall. Men can jump higher. Men can run faster. And so a great part of the NBA is to see these tremendous athletes take off from the dotted line and dunk on each other or do some incredible feats of athleticism that most people can't do. So people pay a lot of money to go see them to do that. The WNBA, not so much. You have very few women that can dunk in the WNBA. And the games is just not as exciting because the women aren't as fast, they're not as big, they're not as strong. That has nothing to do with sex, that has to do with biology. And to the point, the WNBA makes very little revenue. And what most people don't realize is the NBA has to subsidize the WNBA. The WNBA loses money every year. They don't have a huge amount of revenue that they generate, and the NBA subsidizes the WNBA. They have to pay for them to even be able to cover their expenses. And so it's absurd for a woman basketball player to say that she should get paid the same as a male basketball player because they generate much less revenue. I've heard people in the past say it's a shame that these athletes make so much money. That's kind of a Marxist, socialist, communist mindset. And the reason being, because if Michael Jordan, when he was playing, it was estimated he generated billions of dollars for the NBA. So who should get that money? Who should benefit from those billions of dollars that Michael Jordan generated? Of course, you have to have the team owner, because he's the one that has a team there for Michael Jordan to play for. You have to have the stadium, because without the stadium or the arenas that they play in, they have to get money as well. You have the concessions and all that other stuff that make money. But ultimately, Michael Jordan should get paid a large amount of money because he's generating money. Because of his gifts and his talents, and people are paying to see him, he should receive the benefit of that. And the reason I say that the contrary ideology behind that is one that says that Michael Jordan doesn't deserve to get paid that much money. Who should get paid that money? If people are paying to see Michael Jordan, he should benefit off of it. For me to say, well, hey, John Doe, who plays in the NBA, should get just paid as much as Michael Jordan, people aren't paying to see John Doe, they're paying to see Michael Jordan. John Doe may be there too, and he receives benefit of Michael Jordan making money for the league, but yet he shouldn't get paid the same. And so when you think about capitalism versus Marxism, socialism, communism, it is this idea that of the transference of wealth, the redistribution of wealth, but also ultimately it would be the state or the government that benefits off the individual's talents. If you look at communist when Russia and Cuba and all these other things that have competed in the Olympics, you have these great athletes that compete on a high level, they get gold medals and everything, but yet it is the country, the state, that receives the benefit of that, not the individual. The individual can't make money because their revenue that they generate goes to the state. And so just by nature, that's unfair, right? If I was a tremendous athlete or a singer, if I could sing better than anybody else, which I'm not a great singer, if I could sing, like if I had a terrific singing voice and people paid top dollar to come and hear me sing, I should be able to benefit off of me using my God-given talents and abilities. I should be able to benefit off of that, right? Of course, as a pastor, I have to give glory to God for doing those things. But ultimately, when we live in the society that we do, capitalism dictates that I should get compensated for my talents and other people shouldn't have it. But the Marxist ideology says if someone is rich and someone else doesn't have it, then that's unfair. And so we should take from that, steal basically from that person who has the wealth and give it to someone else. That's not godly. That's not what God wants us to do. And so you have to understand exactly where we're at. And so the reason I say that, because that is part of what is known as critical theory, which is to destroy all the institutions of society. So what's called second wave feminism, which was actually created by the globalists, the CIA, the globalists, all those other things. Gloria Steinem was one of the proponents of that. I think it was back in the 60s or so. And it was part of critical theory, because what they did was they criticized the male headship, the male authority, and they tried to make it evil, right? They also because part of what and let me regress real quick. I had talked about this recently, and I'll talk about it some more. George Heigl is a predecessor of Marx and Engels and all those people, and he came up with this idea of materialism, and it moved into what's known as postmodernism. So what they did was, in order to control masses, they redefine terms, and so they say things can mean whatever they want it to mean. There's no absolute truth. What meaning words don't have, they have whatever meaning the person is using the word wants to give you, which is all part of controlling the mind and controlling conversation. And I'm going to get to that in a second. But this whole thing of second wave feminism that always tries to pit people against each other. That's what critical theory is about. So critical theory is about women are oppressed because of men, and it always pits them against each other. So this whole notion that the reason that WNBA doesn't make as much as the NBA is because of sexism is a false narrative, but it's promoted so much that people will even fall into this and believe it. And they'll say, we have to do something. We need to level the playing field, and women need to make as much as men. No, they don't. If they don't generate enough revenue in order to pay them the same, that means you have to take from someone who did earn that revenue. And that's not fair. That's not right. And it isn't sexism. It's people don't pay to see WNBA, and it's not a knock on women. It's just saying that the game's not as exciting. It's like football. I wouldn't pay to see a women's football game. I have paid in the past to see men's football because it's exciting. The men are bigger and stronger. They're faster. It's exciting. They're doing tremendous things. I see some of the catches like Odell Beckham, who can dive 5 yards in the air and catch the ball with one hand, just the palm of his hand. These are spectacular feats of athleticism that people pay to see, because the average person can't do that, right? That's why you pay to see something that's entertaining. And but it's this whole notion of trying to level the playing field, right? That's part of Marxism. That's part of this whole thing to control society. Second wave feminism. Now, I'm going to transition all of this into what we've been talking about before. I mentioned Hegel, right? George Hegel was what is a time called German idealism. And again, German idealism, it was in Europe. It was like around the time after the Enlightenment period and all these type of things, where these intellectuals who believed that they should be in control of society as a whole and the world as a whole, they began to come up with strategies in order to get the masses to surrender control to them. I'm going to say this again. So German idealism, you have this, people use the term the Illuminati. Most of it stems from Germany, right? This whole ideology, part of it is German idealism. And what German idealism is that they basically were saying, like, things only have meaning based on who it is that's using the word, right? So there's no absolute truth. There's no, clear definitions, you can make things mean whatever you want to, which is where we get now. The transgender movement stems from that. And so gender can mean whatever we want it to mean, right? It doesn't have to be attached to biological sex. This whole notion that it's unfair if somebody made a whole lot of money, rich people, and it always separates people into classes. So wealthy people, the only reason, here's what their philosophy is. The only way wealthy people are wealthy is because they had to have stolen it from other people. And that's not always true. You think about someone like a Steve Jobs, who was the CEO of Apple. They created some world altering products that people use. iPhones, the iPads back in the days. I mean, they use iPads still, but all these things that they invented, the Apple computer, they made these things. Steve Jobs was the one who spearheaded it. He was very creative, and because of that, he became very wealthy, right? So it doesn't mean necessarily that Steve Jobs was so wealthy because he stole from people, but it was because he used his ingenuity and his creativity to create something that people pay a lot of money for, right? But it's this whole idea of, if you pit people against each other. So the reason that people are poor is because the wealthy people have stolen from them, and it's not fair that they have wealth, so you have to take the wealth from them and give it to poor people. That's part of critical theory, right? Critical race theory is something I've been talking about in detail, and they always keep one person as the victim and one person as the oppressor. That's what critical theory does. It always creates an idea of an oppressor versus a victim, and it keeps you in a constant state of victimhood. And so women are always oppressed by men. And the reason that the WNBA makes less money is because of men, sexism, and men are oppressing them, right? That's the ideology behind that. They tell you that black people are always being oppressed by white people. And the reason that black people are where they're at is always because they're being oppressed, right? That's the idea behind it. And so when you tie all that into critical theory, critical race theory, all these movements that are really stemming up in society to reshape the culture are all part of this overall plan that these globalists, these intellectuals, if you will, came up with, and it was intentionally done in order to overtake society so that they can seize control. It's called hegemony. Hegemony means that, amen, creator, connector, creativity, risk-taking entrepreneurs should be rewarded. Otherwise, absolutely. And capitalism breeds excellence. Capitalism breeds excellence because when you have a society where people are being rewarded for their efforts, like Steve Jobs, they said he was a workaholic. I mean, they said he never hardly slept. He was so driven, and because of that, he brought great inventions in the world. Some of the other people that brought great things in the world that helped society, the people that created the PC. Think about if we lived in a world that there's no personal computers. Before Microsoft and Apple and some of these other companies that revolutionized, IBM, that revolutionized the computer, and which made way for the personal computer. Before that, one computer would fill up a whole room, and the average person, 99% of the people couldn't have a computer in their house. They couldn't afford it. It was too big. But because you have these people that use their ingenuity, now just about everybody has a computer in their house, or you have a smartphone, or you have something like that. That was part of ingenuity, and it was capitalism that rewarded these people that created that. So, but this whole idea of Marxism, and Hegel and all these philosophers, they came up with this idea of hegemony, which means that the intellectual class should rule over the masses. And in order for them to be able to seize control, they didn't want to seize control by force. So they came up with these terms that I'm talking about here, this critical theory, cultural Marxism, these strategies that came up with, second wave feminism, and all these other things. These were strategies meant by the intellectuals in order to weaken society so they can come in and take over. And ultimately, and I'm going to bring this to a conclusion, with a whole lot, especially in the African-American community, because what they do when they separate you in classes and they use critical race theory, that black people are always oppressed by white supremacy. Because of that, black people have to stick together. And ultimately what happens is they stick together by voting for the same political party. and we all got to vote for this party no matter what. We got to stick together and vote for this party. That's identity politics, and it takes the focus off of the principles in order to vote for the same people. It's a way of control and manipulation. And so ultimately, what is this all doing? What this is doing when we're talking about taking away meaning or reality, it actually reshapes words. Critical theory reshapes words. Political correctness reshapes words. And so when you reshape words, it reshapes your thoughts. They control words. So political correctness wants to control words. Censorship that we're seeing in technology like Facebook and some of these other platforms, they're censoring people. Censoring people is a part of controlling words, controlling language, right? Reshaping the conversation. And when they control words, that helps control your thoughts. When they control your thoughts, it helps control your actions. When it helps control your actions, it controls your behaviors, and behaviors help to control the culture. And so ultimately they start off with words in order to control your thoughts. And here's the problem with censorship. First of all, it was a reason why the First Amendment gave us freedom of speech in America. The reason being because they understand if you can control speech, you can control the thoughts and the beliefs of the culture. So for instance, if someone gives you a position or point of view, absolutely, political correctness stifles free speech, which ultimately stifles free thought and conversations and helps to control societies. So think about this. If for instance, if I gave a position and transgenderism, right? So you say that gender is fluid. You don't have to, biological sex is irrelevant. It's based on your gender. If no one ever is able to challenge that thought, then fact to the society as a whole. And then ultimately, it does away with opposing viewpoints, and then you can move society into the place that you want it to. So they repeat things over and over again in the media and entertainment. Everybody's on the same page. They all have to stick to the script. In Hollywood, most of the Hollywood A-list stars all have to follow the same script. They can't go off pattern. If you can't have opposing viewpoints. So if I say that marriage shouldn't be it should only be between a man and a woman, that's the only definition of marriage. If I believe that and I give you scripture and I preach it, then if I'm not able to say that, and they say that you can make marriage whatever you want to, then that idea is no longer challenged, and it becomes a reality in society, which is what they're doing. They've done that now. If you say what I said about the women, WNBA players shouldn't make as much as NBA players because they don't generate as much revenue, has nothing to do with sexism, belief that it's based on gender or sex, then it becomes a reality. People begin to believe it. And then ultimately society is based on false pretenses and erroneous truths and facts. And when you have that, then it makes society easy to control by those who are shaping and framing the conversation. And it leads to control, which leads to ultimate tyranny. When you give people that type of power that goes unchallenged, as the old saying goes, power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. This has been Joe Green. Stay tuned for the series I'm doing now. I'm going to be doing more talking about critical theory, critical race theory, some of these ideas and thoughts that you need to be aware of because it's evading the public. And whether you are familiar with it or not, it doesn't matter. It is affecting you in some form or fashion. And so anyway, until next time, peace and blessings to you. This is Joe Green signing off. Shalom.